December 6, 2023 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are here with us at the old courthouse and also those who are joining us online. Some of you may be here to provide public comment. The Board of Douglas County Commissioners welcomes public comment in advance. Thank you for following these procedures. Each action item on our agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Comments relating to agenda items are welcome after the board has had an opportunity to discuss the topic. The Board of County Commissioners will invite comments on topics not included on the agenda during our general public comment. That's directly after considering the consent agenda. This is a time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to the general business of the Douglas County Commission. We will first call on folks who are here in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're here on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed at the County Commission. Campaigning for public office is not allowed. We also reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference also. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. For those of you who are listening on our YouTube page and website to our 4 o'clock work session, we did have some audio problems, so it may be a bit softer. We apologize for that. Our agenda tonight, we have 3 items on our consent agenda, then we'll move to general public comment. There are also 3 items on our regular agenda, starting with the 2024 legislative statement. Then we'll talk about the Treatment and Recovery Center Advisory Group. And our final agenda items is the existing conditional use permit review before appointments, Commissioner Miscellaneous. With that, I'll go to our consent agenda. Commissioner Reed is ill this evening and won't be able to join us. So Commissioner Lilly, do you have any questions on the consent agenda items?
I do not.
I don't either. Anyone here in the public like to pull a consent agenda item for further discussion? Checking online, seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I would make a comment on the acceptance of the 2021 and 2022 Bryn Justice Assistance Grant for the Sheriff's Office. I just appreciate the practice of applying for grants. I know it takes time, but I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get our story out in a larger public and also to bring outside dollars in.
Likewise. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 2-0. We'll move on to general public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to provide general public comment here at the courthouse? Seeing none. Anyone online, Sarah? None. All right. We'll close general public comment and move to our regular agenda. And the first item is the 2024 legislative statement. Sarah? Jill?
Thanks, Commissioners. A draft legislative statement for the upcoming 2024 session is in your packet for review and discussion today. We didn't anticipate that you would give this your thumbs up this week. Our hope is that we get some feedback from you all, have some discussion. Of course, we want to make sure we give some time for Commissioner Reed as well. This is a draft statement. Want to have a discussion with you. We have Mallory Lutz with Little Government Relations with us. If there's any questions or discussion that you want to have, Mallory and Stewart have reviewed this and provided some suggestions. It's been circulated widely with staff, including groups like the Food Policy Council. I know our Katie Fitzgerald organized the most recent Criminal Justice Coordinating Council to include Mallory as a guest speaker and made sure they had a discussion. And I think you can see, as one of our leading priority areas, the issue of competency restoration and community interventions is really reflective of a lot of the work that the CJCC as well as Many of the projects that Bob is invested in as well, and Bob and Katie have done a lot of work in partnership with Bert Nash and other partners around competency restoration and exploring community interventions, and they're both here today as well, if need be, but happy to have a discussion about any of the items on here.
Thanks, Jill. Question, Commissioner Willie?
I had quite a few, comments and additions and thoughts when we did this last year, and this kind of builds on last year's edition. And I really read through here and felt it was pretty solid and had a lot of what I'd be looking for. I certainly wouldn't want to move forward without Commissioner Reed here for a vote on it. And I'm glad to have it kind of out in the public for a little bit of a time there where we can get some additional feedback. But I don't have any direct questions at the moment.
I just have a couple of questions and a couple of things that I'd like for consideration for inclusion. And I talked to Mallory, if you want to come up, Mallory, a little bit beforehand about some of those. One, I don't know how much in the public are aware of the student survey bill. And you're saying, well, wait, that's school related. How is that county related? And because we are unable to survey our students about their beliefs and behaviors, it becomes very difficult for us to apply for grants and funding to support prevention programs. And that's something that is part of our Douglas County Health Plan, behavioral health plan, and something we really need to focus on. But we can't gather, or it makes it very difficult to gather that kind of information through the Kansas Communities That Care survey. And it just seems irresponsible to me to not be asking students what their behaviors are and if they're abusing substances and how we might work with them. I understand those who say, well, if we ask them about it, that's encouraging them to do it. I'm not sure I agree with that. Well, I don't need to say I'm not sure. I don't agree with that. So I think it does have an impact, and would ask my colleagues to consider including some language about that. Mallory, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I would say that's a pretty accurate description of what the situation is. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 sessions ago where they did change it so that it went from being an opt-out to having to be an opt-in. And so obviously not only for local, does it impact you at the local level, but even at the state level. I mean, the federal grants that become available to KDAD, agencies like KDADs, that can sometimes strictly limit them then to the grants that they're able to apply for if they don't have the data to back up to say, oh, well, here's X number of kids that have suicide ideation or any of those behavioral health issues.
Can I ask, is Kansas an outlier among states to have that ban?
That is a very good question. I would probably venture to say yes, but I can get that information for you probably.
Yeah, I do think that there is the Parents' Bill of Rights. It's attached to that Parents' Bill of Rights, which is sort of this national movement, and that I think really is limiting schools' abilities to do their jobs, but in an attached way, it's impeding our community's ability to be good partners with our schools. So DECA is a community partner we work with a lot, and it really prevents DECA from applying for grant because we can't even tell how many of our students, things I included substance abuse, but also suicidal ideation. I mean, some of our very specific goals in Douglas County around community health, and we can't even survey our students to see where they are. It makes it really hard to get data points to see if we're having, what kind of impact we're having if we can't ask students questions. And I'm not saying we can't ask them, but it really, I can get you some of the, I'm trying to remember who, I think it was Greenbush last year did quite an extensive survey to see how many districts were not able to collect information and come up with some strategies. But that's asking a lot for schools to come up with communication strategies to get around the law. I don't think that's fair. So.
And I think too, just in the context of the opioid and fentanyl crisis in particular, I think this data is something that's probably more important now than it's ever been, so.
I'll ask another. This is not related to that.
Okay.
So I read a little bit that the discussion about the Kansas ad valorem tax relief is still kind of being kicked around. I don't know that it's being kicked around seriously at all, but are there thoughts about that or what should happen with it?
Well, it's certainly being kicked around seriously by local government folks such as yourself. And of course, I know the Kansas Association of Counties, particularly over the interim, I know have really been hitting the issue very hard. They have the whole webpage devoted to restoring LAVTR, which is a great resource. I mean, there's videos and interviews with local government folks, so I would encourage you and others to use that when communicating with our folks at the state level. It has been pretty clear that legislative leadership has no intention whatsoever of restoring LAVTR, and they have many other ideas for providing tax relief, and LAVTR is probably not one of them.
A couple others. We have a section in here, and I'm happy to see it around senior and vulnerable adults, but I hope we can beef up a little bit our senior section there, specifically around training and workforce development for those who care for seniors and around certified nurse aid. I know the reimbursement rates recently increased, but they're still not very high. As a community, we have continued to provide support for organizations that support CNAs. And I think that's a real crisis coming as our community ages. I'd love to see us encourage higher reimbursement rates for that. Also, better workforce training and more workforce training that may be incentivizing in a way those who go into that profession, and also those who teach in that profession, because it's very hard. Nurses get paid very high rate, but you have to have a certain licensure in order to teach in that allied health field. And sometimes that really, it prevents people from leaving hospitals to do that teaching because the pay is just so low for that. So I know this involves lots of entities, including the Kansas Board of Regents would be involved there, but I'd love some exploration of how we might be involved, because eventually that cost comes back to Douglas County in order to support our most vulnerable citizens.
I'm happy to attempt to provide a little bit more context. I would note that this is an area, I'm certainly not, senior care is not an area that I necessarily have any remote expertise in. One thing I would note, particularly when talking about reimbursement rates, I think you alluded to this, it's very much a piecemeal process at the legislature. I almost kind of liken it to the process of when counties have to go to the legislature to ask for special tax measures on the ballot, which, by the way, we can have a conversation about that later, because I think they're going to simplify that process. But everybody kind of comes to the legislature and asks for their own specific specialty, please increase our rates. And I think they've started to realize that that is really not a sustainable process. And so the Medicaid director, we have a new one, by the way, over the last couple of months, she has said that they are making it a priority to kind of study all of the Medicaid rates that have not, particularly those that have not been reimbursed or have not been raised in some cases, decades. And so kind of doing a study that looks at comparing it to other states as well, and Medicare benchmarks and all sorts of things, so that they might do something kind of more across the board and not just picking whoever has the loudest voice kind of at the State House, which historically has been the case. I would also note we are in the middle of the CanCare RFP process, and so I believe they're selecting new MCOs. I need to look at the timeline, January. And so while rates are not necessarily, the rates are not established in the RFP, rates will be negotiated between bidders and KDHE. So I think over the next couple of months, we will have maybe a little bit more information, but just note those few things.
Separate one. I know cybersecurity is mentioned in here. Is there anything, I mean, the state is well aware of the problem with the court's cybersecurity. Are there other pieces where we kind of need them to be stepping up because it impacts local communities also?
I think that's a great question. I don't know how much insight I'm able to offer on that at this point, although I do think that cybersecurity, AI. I mean, those are probably going to be pretty serious conversations this session. In particular, probably it's also going to revolve around elections and election security, which probably doesn't come as a surprise since we've seen those conversations steadily over the last several sessions. But I think the situation with the court in particular probably is going to drive many conversations around election security.
I just have one more question, Mallory, and this is just some conversation I've heard around marijuana and taxation of marijuana. What are you hearing at the Capitol around that?
We are actually hearing that there are renewed conversations around medical marijuana in particular. I can't really quite explain what has changed or why, but it is clear that that issue is back on the table, really actually just within the last couple weeks. So that is probably something we will see coming out of the 2024 session. What exactly that looks like, I don't know at this point, but yeah, absolutely. I know the league, even in their statement of municipal policy, while they don't necessarily take a stance on marijuana, it's clear that local communities should have the option and to reap some of the revenue. So, yeah.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mallory.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, is this some of those issues, do you kind of want us to draft up, or I'll defer to Jill?
If you have any suggestions, I'll take them and try to incorporate them. If you have time to do that, Mallory, I'll take all the help I can get.
Okay, all right, we'll work something up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll open this up for public comment. Anybody like to provide public comment on this item?
Hi, Gene Dorsey, Lawrence, Kansas. I wanted to call your attention to the last sentence under criminal justice reform, where the county is suggesting that the state eliminate a mandatory jail sentence for driving on a suspended license. I think you might want to clarify that a little bit. The reasons you might get a suspended license are driving under the influence, hit and runs, using a vehicle to create a felony, violating insurance laws, and refusal to submit to a blood alcohol content. I don't believe you intend to have chronic DUI people out driving on the streets, and I don't know that a jail sentence is the best way to handle them, but I think you might take a look at that and clarify it a little bit. Thanks.
Any other public comment on this item? Checking online, Sarah? Okay. Bring it back up to the commission. I think it's our intention that this is our first pass at it. And as Jill said, I think Commissioner Reed would like to weigh in as well. So we're just going to take this and it's for informational purposes only. I'm not ready to do a recommendation on this legislative statement. Appreciate all the work, Jill, and so many staff members who weighed in on this, and we'll continue. Anything else, Jill?
No, I'll just make a comment that we'll do some research on the public comment just to get clarity. But my suspicion is that that comment, that it speaks to allowing for discretion of judges rather than that being that's the mandatory with the 3 offenses. But we'll get some more clarity on that and follow up.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, we'll close that agenda item and go on to our next one, which is the Treatment and Recovery Center Advisory Group. I see Bob Tryansky coming up to the podium. Hi, Bob.
Good evening. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
see if I can do this with my computer better than I can do this with your computer. And it looks like I can't, yeah, there we go. Okay. Tonight, we would like to follow up on the conversation we had during the study session about a month ago with regard to progress at the Treatment and Recovery Center. Commissioners will remember that as part of the agreement between the county and Bert Nash to operate the Treatment and Recovery Center, one of the components of the agreement was that the county would establish an advisory group, a community advisory group, to provide feedback, support, and embrace those values that we talked about: access, transparency, and accountability. So what I wanted to do this evening was to walk through quickly, in pretty short order, kind of the structure that Bert Nash and Douglas County would like to propose for that, in the hopes that commissioners would approve moving forward on setting up this advisory group. So in consultation, the Bert Nash and Douglas County, we meet, and the TRC leadership team, we meet monthly for check-ins on the progress with the Treatment and Recovery Center. This has been a focus for the last couple of months, and I'll just walk you through it. So the idea of the advisory group would have the following mission. The mission of the Treatment and Recovery Center Advisory Group is to create a team of community leaders, subject matter experts, and lived experience advocates with a broad range of experience and expertise in behavioral health and integrated care. The TRC Advisory Group will collaborate with community members seeking urgent mental health and/or substance use services at the TRC and provide strategies and feedback to support this mission. Couple of features of this group. First one is that it's advisory in nature. It's not a board. It's not a governing entity. It provides consensus-based recommendations. We've heard, as we have gone around from community to community through some of the technical assistance programs that we've participated in, through some of the site visits that we've been a part of, through some of the site visits that we've hosted, that really sort of using consensus-based recommendations through boards is the way to go. And so we wanted to kind of embrace that as a value. It would guide a process of continuous quality improvement. It would work collaboratively to promote integration among stakeholders. We continue to have challenges and opportunities to truly embrace the idea of building an integrated system of care. That includes working together with the Federally Qualified Health Center, Heartland CHC, the Community Mental Health Center, now a CCBHC, LMH as our community's hospital, the Housing Authority, DECA, Heartland RADAC. All of our partners bring a particular type of expertise to the table, but it's only when we truly integrate and ask ourselves what's the best way to collaborate and combine expertise that we get the best results for the community. And the last thing is to provide a forum for elevating systemic challenges and implementing evidence-based and informed solutions. So this would be a group that the commission can turn to if you wanted to do a deeper dive on a particular issue, or you wanted to seek and consult members of the community for their recommendations. This would be a body that could do that, an advisory group. We also drafted a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that I think speaks to one of the higher values we're trying to embody in this group, which is to make sure that we are elevating the voice of lived experience, among others. So the TRC Advisory Group shall be committed to reflecting the interests of our stakeholders, which means the members and work groups must include subject matter and lived experience experts. At least 35% of all members shall have direct lived experience with mental illness, substance use disorders, suicidality, and/or housing insecurity. That last one is something that was added during our CIT Council meeting 2 weeks ago. When that group reviewed this, they suggested that we specifically call out and elevate the idea of having people who have experienced homelessness as a part of this group. The advisory group will embrace inclusion and represent the diversity of our community. The advisory group will champion human rights, recognizing the specific needs of the individuals served by the TRC, and defending the inherent worth and rights of all. The advisory group will also ensure equity by requiring members to actively work to remove barriers to care and improve outcomes by focusing on underserved and marginalized community members. The individuals serving on the TRC advisory group shall recognize that holding belief isn't enough. These beliefs must translate into visible and deliberate action. Structure of this, I think, is pretty straightforward. The idea would be a group of 10 to 15 members appointed by the county. The application to become a member of the advisory group would be open to all members of the community. We'd like to open up a form on the portal for boards for this purpose. And we would sort of continue to work together with Bert Nash to make sure that we present a list of candidates that reflect these 5 different sectors of the community. So community advocates, lived expertise, law enforcement, EMS, justice system participants, people with physician and clinical expertise, and folks from the human services, legal, organizational, management sectors. Those 5 sectors, 2 to 3 members from each of those sectors would kind of constitute the structure of the table or the structure of the group. Lived experience and expertise should reflect the diversity of our community and the scope and breadth of behavioral health challenges presented by TRC clients. The advisory group will meet quarterly, and the first meeting would be in the Q1 of 2024. So our hope would be to post and publish the form around the 15th of this month, allow about 30 days for people to respond to that opportunity and the form. It might be, depending on the number of people that we get, that we may need to extend that. It's hard to tell given the holidays. But the hope would be that we could be in a position to have a first advisory group meeting in February of 24. Patrick Schmitz is here from Bert Nash. And so we are happy to stand for questions.
I have a question. I think you just said it and I missed it. How long do people have to express an interest in serving on this?
So our thought is 30 days. So 30 days from when we post. We talked in our admin team meeting about doing that December 15th. Just want to make sure the form works the way that we want it to. And so by January 15th.
Thank you.
And I think we put that information in a press release too. So we'll do it once we get the form live. We'll do a press release and say how long we'll be accepting applications.
I appreciate that. I just want to be able to communicate back with the public as I have the opportunity of people who are interested, let them know how long they have to make that decision and fill in the form.
Yeah, we also internally brainstormed a list of people that we'd want to reach out to. So I think various people in various sectors will be reaching out and letting people know that this opportunity to apply is available. But everyone will apply in the same way and go through the same process.
How do you see community members who aren't on the advisory board accessing their meetings? Would the meetings be open to the public? Would they?
I would imagine that those are open meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
we did a similar thing in earlier seasons of the Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition. We had a community stakeholder group, and we met quarterly. We met at LMH in the auditorium of LMH, and there were members of that who were invited to the table, but all of our stakeholders were invited to participate and had opportunities to comment and ask questions.
Okay, good.
I think if there was a task, like you were looking for a specific recommendation or set of options to come from the group, I think that would come from, the members, obviously, but I think everybody is really open to as much transparency and accountability as possible. That's what we're striving for.
And if community members had concerns about the TRC, would this be the group to go to, or?
Well, it could be. I would say that if people have concerns about the TRC has a number of mechanisms built into it for direct feedback to the TRC staff and leadership team. So particularly if people have an experience that they want timely response from TRC, that would be one venue. But even you could envision a situation where somebody might not feel comfortable going through that process, and this would just provide an alternative forum to express concerns.
I appreciate the thought into transparency and how do we get this information in front of the public and how does the public access that. I also just want to recognize how brave you have to be to come and represent lived experience in a very public setting. So that's a hard call from community members and we're asking for that. So I just want to recognize that that's a lot of bravery, and we know that we're asking for a lot with that.
And I appreciate that. I also think we're in a season where there is more lived experience voice coming into our system. And I think when you talk to people who sit in those chairs, some of them often would say, don't sugarcoat this. Don't make this. I'm perfectly ready to come in, and it's a mixed experience. But you can err. What I would say is there's a danger of erring on the side of being too protective, and you wind up excluding people and missing people because of that.
And missing what we need to hear.
Missing what we need to hear.
So this advisory group would be tasked with kind of, oversight or eyes on and evaluating the processes through the TRC. Would they also be kind of by extension looking at the other pieces of our crisis system? Is that a holistic view, or is it just this one entity?
This entity really is to be focused on TRC, and setting this entity up, I think, is a step along the process of having a larger crisis system coalition that will provide system oversight. Let's do one step at a time. I think there's tremendous work being done through the leadership of Chief Llewellyn, Chief Lockhart, and the members of that GPL project. I think that group and this group over the next 12 months will kind of meet in the middle, and we'll get to some real permanent and sustainable structure. I think it's quite likely that members of the advisory group might find themselves wanting to be on the crisis system coalition. And so I think we're trying to develop a real community feedback impact, input and governance or oversight structure. I guess really oversight. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I could recognize that this is a step towards that, because I know we'd had discussions about both. I also wanted to say that this group's going to have access to some pretty exciting data to work with, just based on kind of the feedback we've had from operations at the TRC and the GL, the government GPL work, kind of connecting us to other communities. I think this will be a really exciting, interesting place for the community members to dig in. I think there's going to be a lot of meat there.
Yeah, and I think, we had members of the public who raised questions at the study session. They also raised sort of more detailed questions when the team from TRC 2 weeks ago also did a review with the CIT Council of that data. And they zeroed in on some data points that this group and that event didn't. So I think, over the course of time with these meetings in various sort of contexts, what we will get is sort of a variety of lenses looking into data and asking us, what is it telling us? Where are the opportunities? Where are the barriers? What do we need to focus on? I think that's what we're trying to, I think this is a period of development of our, Commissioner Kelly's always asking us sort of like, what is our data culture that we're trying to build? I think this is a step in that direction.
I don't have any further questions. Thanks, Bob. Is there any public comment on this item? Online, Sarah? Okay. Close public comment. Bring it back up to the commission for motions or discussion. General consternation.
Well, our recommendation is to consider, I believe we are considering, do we need a motion specifically to say that we're issuing a form for people to come and ask to be considered for that?
Yeah. Sarah?
I think we can have consensus to move forward. I'm going to look at what the motion I think we put on there.
Would it be helpful to say that, I can,
Direct staff to proceed with forming the Treatment and Recovery Center Advisory Group is perfectly fine motion. but
okay, as
that we will
outlined in the packet, so it's clear that it's 10 to 15 members that
Right.
would be, the one thing that's not, I don't think it's actually articulated in here, but I heard Bob say it, was that the appointees to the advisory committee would be appointed by the Douglas County Commission. So I think we just need to be clear on that. I heard you say it, but I didn't see it in the presentation.
We'll bring that back to you. Our goal is to bring back that's what staff and the Burt Nash staff will bring back to the commission.
Oh, okay, so this is not, you're bringing back a,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
okay,
So really, I mean, other than just.
direct staff. to-
Direct staff to
it.
continue along the work we're doing, formally kicking off our open period to accepting applications. We'll bring back a full slate to you.
Okay,
I concur. Now you have consensus.
Great, sounds awesome.
we will move on to our third and final item this evening, which is an existing conditional use permit review. Don't you all leave at once. This is exciting stuff.
Most of the staff is
All
here
right.
at this group, while staff's coming to the podium, just to provide a little bit of context, there's going to be no action on this item. This is simply for informational purposes only. This is a result as commissioners have been talking quite a bit about some additional conditional use permits, in particular types of conditional use permits that we have. In collaboration with City of Lawrence Planning and Douglas County Zoning and Codes have collaborated together to, did you preload, Leo, your stuff to the?
No, I have it on the other laptop, but having trouble finding the Zoom link to get in.
We've gone through an exhaustive, comprehensive review of conditional use permits. And that's quite an extensive process. So there's a whole team of folks that have worked hard to bring this to you.
Commissioners, this is Robin. I just sent Leo the link.
Right. Sorry about that. All right. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Leo Runke. I'm the administrative zoning specialist with Zoning and Codes. And here with me is
Drew Bilby, Planning Development Services Planning.
And staff is here today just to present the findings of some research that we've been doing over the past few months. Under previous direction from the County Commission, we've been directed to, or staff has been directed to review all existing conditional use permits and find out some more information and develop a comprehensive list. And that is pretty much what we're here doing today. So going into research, staff at a very minimum sought to establish the following for each permit, and that includes dates of approval, review dates, if any, expiration dates, if any, same with conditions of approval, associated conditional use permits, whether that permit would be inactive or active, and whether that conditional use permit is in compliance with county code or the conditions of approval for that specific CUP. And this was a collaborative effort between the city and the county, and that's why we're both here. So going into the numbers, from 1969 forward, there have been approximately 416 CUPs that have been brought before the county commissioners. Out of those 416, staff has determined that approximately 153 are still active or otherwise valid. Of those 153 that are still active, staff believes that approximately 29 are potentially in violation or out of compliance or otherwise operating past the expiration date. And additionally, out of those 153, there are 26 which staff needs to research further to determine, whether or not it would still be considered active, out of compliance with code or conditions of approval. And as we continue to research and progress through these unknown permits, more are likely to become closed or removed from our list altogether as found as inactive, expired, or otherwise. This chart here just goes over conditional use permits, all 416 from 1969 forward. Not going to belabor this, but just notice some are starred, and that kind of goes into how regulation updates in 2020 changed how CUPs were processed and the requirements for what needed a CUP and or public process in general. So after 2020, minor and major utilities, or major utilities, I should say, require a CUP in residential districts only, but can be processed with the site plan in industrial districts. Minor utilities can be processed with the site plan in all zoning districts. So this is a big change. You saw major utilities was one of the more frequently permitted things, or one of the more common CUPs that have been brought before the county commission. But following this 2020 regulation updates, that's not so much the case anymore. Government buildings, likewise, they require a CUP in residential districts, but can be permitted in industrial and business districts with a site plan. So much like major, minor, or major utilities, these require a CUP pretty much all the time prior, and now they can be processed in a through a less intensive way. Ancillary agricultural retail sales. So retail sales that are associated with a greenhouse, nursery, or other active agricultural use on site can be approved with the site plan for up to 500 square feet. Mobile parks or mobile home parks are no longer permitted. Retail sales, I really don't need to go through all of these, but one thing that I really want to point out is vacation rentals. So currently staff are drafting revised regulations, which would make the process for approving vacation rentals more administrative. There would be some situations where we would need to bring them before the governing body, but by and large, we do plan to make those administrative. And then farm stand and farmers markets, permitted uses after 2020 with specific use standards. So this is just another graphic showing kind of how things changed after 2020. Mining and excavation was a really big one, from 1969 forward. Some where we start to see new things are with vacation rentals, equipment storage, and event centers. So just kind of new uses that are coming forward that we haven't really dealt with that much or at that level in the past. So that's just something that we felt was interesting to point out, and kind of what is being brought forward and what applicants are going for and how that's changed. Oh.
If I can interrupt just a little bit. So I think the short story is that you're going to see a lot less conditional use permits moving forward.
Yes.
That's the goal, at least.
That's the goal, but you may not like us when we talk about reviews, but we'll get to that. So again, this is just another graphic kind of showing how things were, or what was brought forward by use from 1969 to present, and then what we still see as active, the changes in what's still there. So if you look at like mining and excavation, so from 1969 forward, there have been 49 mining and excavation CUPs, but active, there are only 9. So that really just kind of goes to show that staff really hasn't taken the time, or had the time or the staff resources or the capacity to make or to go through and do a review like this and kind of put all this data into one comprehensive document that we can refer back to and share. So it's really interesting, just kind of how things have changed over time and what is still there as opposed to what was brought forward. So the process that staff used to, mark CUPs that are inactive or expired. So there were 3 main situations that we encountered. The most frequent one was just CUPs that were expired and the land use was clearly inactive and or discontinued. We were directed to close the CUP and note the update in our records. And I should say that staff worked with county council and in developing these 3 strategies to deal with CUPs.
Leo, can I ask you a question there?
Sure.
Does the former applicant, who maybe that wasn't even the person who owns that property now, but is there any process of letting them know that that was closed out? Mostly, I imagine if they're not using that or conducting the use for which they were permitted, it maybe automatically times out?
So in our county code, if the land use that was requested and approved through the CUP was not implemented within 2 years, it automatically becomes null and void. So that was a situation that we encountered a lot. There are also conditions that note, if the property changes ownership, then the CUP immediately becomes null and void. And that's kind of speaks to like the intensity of the research that we had, really combing through conditions, using paper minutes here in the commission house, archive minutes, staff or files that staff had in office, online, just really trying to get through everything and figure out. So we try to not leave anything unturned.
I ask about something fairly specific, but what about a quarry where it obviously still looks like a quarry? It wasn't closed down and remediated, but it's not been actively quarrying for some period of time that's greater than 2 years. Does that CUP have to be specifically stated that it has no end date, or just not mentioning that it has an end date? So is that one that would automatically time out or not?
So specifically with those really intense land uses, we have we really haven't, those have been kind of put aside for now, because we really want to make sure that we don't want to, I guess we don't want to make any determination on a really big land use without really doing our due diligence, like contacting the landowner. Those are ones where we're being a little more cautious and kind of taking it slowly, and we're really trying to work with the landowner and figure out, a path forward. Does that make? Yeah. So expired CUPs in which the land use was active, so these would be considered out of compliance. Staff has been directed to contact these landowners and begin the process of either renewing the existing CUP or obtaining a new one altogether. And then CUPs without a set expiration date, clearly an active land use, staff has been directed to close and note and update in our records, particularly in situations where where the operator and or property owner have changed. But like you said, in those really intense land uses, ones that may have not been conditioned really specifically with end dates, reviews, we're kind of setting those aside and plan to, work through those as we can going forward. So as for outcomes, we were able to close approximately 263 conditional use permits. So that is about 63% of all CUPs that have been brought before the Board of County Commissioners since 1969. And this allowed us to, create that really clean, clear list of CUPs, including their conditions, review dates if they have any, and really just any staff notes that we made as we went through and researched. And we also were able to identify any potential compliance issues or out of compliance properties, either with county code or the conditions of approval. And those have been flagged and can be worked through by staff as we have time and capacity.
So this is kind of where I jump in. So what you're looking at right now is the city's interactive map. When you're looking at our submittal types, this is for a CUP. And so right now, this doesn't really exist on the Douglas County Property Viewer. With this project, we are going to establish this for the Douglas County Property Viewer. So those boxed items on the right, the project ID, the type, the address, the description of the project, you have the applicant, the planner assigned, the submittal date, and then the expiration date. All of those will be in that new Douglas County GIS layer that will be publicly available for everyone to have on there, basically to add into their map and look at. So that's something that we are going to get programmed, when we have kind of this information consolidated and ready to go.
Yeah, and I think a big thing there is that, we put all this work in, and staff has put all of this work into consolidating, creating this comprehensive list, but this isn't just for staff. We ultimately want to implement this in a public-facing format and increase public transparency related to information of CUPs. We're not trying to, withhold anything. We want this to become public. We want to share what we've been able to research.
Would there be a GIS layer specifically for CUPs? Like you could pull it up for the whole county and go look, as opposed to like having to know what property you're looking for and clicking on that?
Yes, so essentially there will be, if we jump back, it's kind of hard to see, but where that pop-up is, it's an icon, and so those will pop up in the layer. Basically, if you're somewhere close to where there is a CUP, there will be a little icon that's color-coded, and the legend will say, conditional use permit, and you can click on it, and when you click on it, you'll get that pop-up that has that information.
And we do have, to an extent, a layer on our county GIS that does show conditional use permits, but ultimately it's just not the quality that we will be able to get from our partners with the City of Lawrence Planning and Development Services, who are really, really well versed in GIS and have the ability to make these changes on the drop of a hat. So it's really going to help expand what we already have.
Yeah, it'll also kind of lower staff's time on, some of these questions, who is responsible for this, when does it expire, when was it submitted, that all can be answered by looking at the GIS rather than a phone call and having staff, look up, find the old minutes or find the plan. They can look at the GIS layer. It'll be much quicker.
Should help also some of those that lie near a city boundary. So what's happening within the city, what's happening within the rural area. If we're looking for something that may have like proximity issues of not wanting to have too many clustered like Airbnb or something like that. So yeah, I like the idea.
Like I said earlier, we'll have less CUPs going forward, but you may not like me for what I have to say now. So what staff determined throughout our research was that reviews were not as consistently performed as we would have liked them to, and as they were required by the conditions. This can be attributed to many things, but I mean, simply lack of staff capacity and just not the greatest collaboration between staff to determine duties related to CUP reviews. But now going forward, now that we have this list of conditions and CUPs and when reviews are required to be done, how often they're required to be done, what needs to be done, whether the review needs to be brought before the governing body again, or whether it's just an administrative review, we have all that information now. We have it consolidated. So going forward, we're going to develop a better plan of attack for preventing missed reviews and ensuring that we're catching reviews on the front end to make sure they're done as required by conditions or by the conditions of approval. And currently there are around 35 existing CUPs out of our 153 that have a review condition. All 35 will need to be reviewed at some point in the future.
Leo?
Yep.
What part of that did you think we wouldn't like to hear?
Well, just that more CUPs may have to come forward for reviews, and they weren't really on our radar because we didn't have this information. We hadn't taken the time to figure out what needed to be reviewed, when reviews were going to come up. But now that we do, we've kind of found ourselves with
More work to do?
more work to do.
Okay.
But it's good because we're really, it's a concerted effort to clean up and make sure that going forward, collaboration between the city and the county, or planning and development services and zoning and codes are going to catch those on the front end and really set us up for success going forward.
Great.
Again, kind of to piggyback off of that, right now it's kind of a weird gray area. I'm sure you're familiar with PDS.
Do me a favor, get on that microphone.
Yep. So PDS planners, myself, Mary Miller, Sandy Day, will take a CUP through the process of the Planning Commission, City Commission, and then Board of County Commission. And then at the end, when there's compliance issues, it's kind of this gray area between, is it zoning and codes who goes out and looks at it? Is it planning and development services that go out? So we've kind of come to this agreement that it's going to be a partner effort where the planner assigned will go out with zoning and codes. So the planner will have kind of those ideas of the conditions that they came up with in those public meeting processes, and zoning and codes will have the idea of implementation of code enforcement. And so it's going to be much more of a team effort now rather than, I thought you were handling this. I thought we were handling this, that kind of thing.
That is just the opposite of, I would not like that. I like that a lot.
Well, that's good to hear.
Looking at two county commissioners who formerly served on the planning commission and kind of recognize like this gray area has been uncomfortable. So I'm really excited to start having good data to be able to put some of those old CUPs to bed and say, we don't have to worry about that at all. Like I find it all very exciting that we're kind of dialing in on what does need our attention and what doesn't need our attention, and what kind of attention is it going to take and who's going to do it. These are all great conversations to be having. I know a lot of our CUPs are kind of small applicants that we don't want to burden them any more than the process already burdens them. But some of our applicants are also bigger companies where we can start talking about like if we know what our costs are associated with the review, maybe there's a conversation about getting some of those covered so that we're not just taking all the burden on of review without a partnership there.
Yeah, that's a great point. So going forward, discussing next steps, our office, Zoning and Codes, processes home-based business permits. We have currently staff's aware of around 56 unpermitted home-based businesses. 16 of those will likely require a CUP. Prioritizing based on life safety and community impact, approximately 5 would be what staff would consider to be a high priority.
The others that are not considered high priority for life safety, is there a reason to flag those for a conversation as we're looking at home business regulations about maybe they don't need to fall and maybe they don't need to require a CUP? Maybe that's something that if we haven't regulated it until now, it's really been okay. And which of those are like having significant neighborhood impacts that neighbors are really ready for us to tackle? So I'm just curious, kind of as we dig into those pieces, that's something that I flag since it's co-occurring with our work on rural home business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so home business kind of falls within the same boat as our short-term rentals, which staff, like you were saying, we don't want to overburden applicants with, extensive permitting processes. So like short-term rentals, the revising home-based business regulations, has been discussed, but ultimately, we're just kind of taking things step by step and going through what we can. But moving to short-term rentals, our staff plans to have revised short-term rental regulations ready within perhaps the next 3 to 4 months. And currently, out of 36 unpermitted short-term rentals, 10 will likely require a CUP after the regulations are revised. So that just goes to show, not all of these, as they would now, would need a CUP. We're planning to make this a more administrative process that will be easier on both the applicant and staff. So, like I mentioned earlier, there are around 25 CUPs that are out of compliance with either county code or conditions of approval, and we plan to begin the process of reaching out to these landowners and bringing their uses back into compliance. And then onto our next project, staff begins to do a similar review of existing county site plans like we did with conditional use permits. And there are approximately 262 on record within the county. Currently, we address these as they come forward for a particular location. So this will allow us to continue getting ahead of things on the front end as opposed to having to catch them up from behind when they come to our attention and it's already too late. So ultimately, that's kind of where that's coming from, but yeah. And then, any questions?
We asked a lot of questions during the presentation, so I don't have a lot left for the end of the presentation. We did have a piece of public comment in our packet for a landowner who had formerly had a CUP application that was not allowed to go forward, and her concern was that it was still in the list of the long list that wasn't shown up here, but we have in our packets. Is that, I'm not sure that list is going to be read far and wide beyond the people in this room, but I'm just curious if you could comment about that.
Yeah, so what was given, the list that was given in the public packet is somewhat of a reduced and minimized list. We didn't include review dates, conditions, staff notes. Other status markers, for instance, we have ones, we would say whether it was no longer valid, whether it was the most recent, whether it was withdrawn. What we included in the staff report was whether it was just simply active or inactive. And that was used because at the end of the day, that was one thing that that staff really wanted to get out of this. Like, how many conditional use permits are active? How many are inactive? You can go into whether it was withdrawn, whether it was deferred, whether it wasn't implemented within 2 years. There are a variety of situations that could lead something to become labeled, or that could lead, a permit to be labeled as inactive. But that's just what we put in the packet for simplicity's sake, and trying to just concisely give off as much information as we could.
But there would be nothing keeping a member of the public who might be on this list from contacting you and saying, my project should not be on that list, right? Yeah.
No, and we expect that. And if anything else, if this just generates more discussion, we have more residents reaching out to us to inquire or ask. We're happy about that.
Leo, can
Happy
you,
to assist.
I'm sorry, I was trying really hard not to interrupt. Can you stop sharing and be closer to the microphone?
Yep. Sorry.
So I love a good database. And one of the reasons I was excited for this was when CUPs come to us, they have conditions on them. And we often ask, how did we decide on that condition, right? So typically some of those areas are the length of the permit and when it needs to be renewed. Another one is operating hours. And it, as a commissioner, sometimes it seems rather, I'm not going to say random, because I think that undermines the work that the planner has done getting it to that stage. But it's hard to make connections or what are common practices for these kind of properties, because we've seen ones where operating hours ended at 10, and then the next one that looks somewhat similar operates till 11, right? Did you record some of those things in your data? Is your plan to record them so that we can get some, certainly the purpose of a conditional use permit is to do it for the conditions of that property, but it would be good. It feels like it'd be good to have a starting spot for some of them.
Yeah. So in our database, we do have the conditions of approval of every permit that we could possibly find. It was really easy for the ones that the minutes were still available online. So about 2002, it was really easy. Once you get behind that, everything's on paper. So we're having to hand type in the notes. But, one of the really good things, both from a staff and commissioner standpoint, is that these are all categorized by use. So you can sort by use. You can, see, if you want to see, I want to look at all the vacation rental conditions for every vacation rental that has been brought before us. You can sort and filter out every conditional use permit besides vacation rentals and compare, all those conditions right up against each other as they are. So that's another thing that, we as staff and are excited about, to just enable more consistency. So.
Is the thought, since we have kind of will have a larger volume of CUPs that either have gone out of compliance and need to be brought into compliance or never did have a CUP, is there a cleanup process that streamlines some of that? Is that a conversation about some kind of an amnesty kind of thing? That's not the right word, but because we don't want to have people benefit from having gone around the system, and yet we have, a fair amount of work to get caught up with that normally through the public process takes a great deal of staff time and puts them in front of the public and such. So is it all the same process, or is there any conversation about what could happen to get these in compliance more quickly?
That's a conversation that's still to be had, and we'll likely have to discuss that with, planning and development services and the directors to figure out a path forward. But I would imagine that based on the volume that, staff will have to find, other ways to bring people into compliance outside of, the hard public process. And staff does that, already. We try to work with landowners, meeting them where they are. We don't, try to bring down the rule of law. We just really want to bring people into compliance, without being overbearing, and just working with them as much as we can, meeting them where they are. So I would imagine that would translate over into out of compliance CUPs too. Yeah.
And I very much appreciate that that is the method and the philosophy behind it. Of course, life safety kinds of things, we need to get those worked into compliance for the safety of the operators and their neighbors, et cetera, or the public. I guess I'm thinking more specifically about CUPs that had fallen out of compliance, but also hadn't had that review process that maybe was specified. And so like if we fell down on our end in terms of not being able to review in a timely manner, like not punishing them for that. Like if we didn't tell them it was out of compliance, finding a clearer path to get back.
Yeah, staff definitely doesn't plan to go back and, reviews that were missed, for instance, in like 2017 or 2018 or 2019, we don't plan to come back and bring those back forward. We just want to ensure that moving forward, going into the future, we're set up for success to make sure those reviews are always done in accordance with how they were approved.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I don't have any further questions. Thanks, guys. This is agenda item, so of course we'll take public comment. Anyone here like to provide public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Well, gentlemen, don't take that as a personal affront. I think I'm really excited about the work that you've done, and I want to thank Tanya and Jeff for working together on this. That's pretty exciting. I really think the GIS map is wonderful for community members as they consider properties if they're purchasing or just curious about a property and what the conditions are for that property. I think that's fantastic transparency, and I know it was a ton of work. I'm sure part of it was fun, digging back through old files and reading those. But I think it's really helpful for us as commissioners to be able to see in the past what has been approved and sort of what's those standards, because we do get a lot of, well, why did you decide this, or the public saying you should add something else. And it gives us the ability to say, well, we haven't added that in the past. Why are we, there's one that I remember from my time on the planning commission where we were trying to regulate the smell of something. And maybe that was good, but I think it was really outside the lines of what a conditional use permit should be. And so I appreciate all the work that you've put into it.
I agree. I know this was a huge team effort and a lot of work, and I appreciate the tools that it gives us for how to evaluate how we move forward with some of the land use kind of policy things that we've been thinking about. So it's really valuable. Thank you.
All right. There's no action on this item. Move on to appointments. I don't think we had any appointments this week, Sarah. No. We have a weekly manager memo, though, and any miscellaneous items.
Thanks, Commissioners. My memo is in the packet. I want to express my appreciation for your indulgence in what was a pretty nerdy government afternoon, early evening here at Douglas County between tax financing systems and conditional use permit databases. So my little government nerd heart is totally stoked because this is stuff that we've been needing to get done, and we're making a ton of progress, and I think it's going to serve us well in the future. So appreciate the commission hearing that side of what we do all the time that don't always come to you. My memo, the only thing I would really note that's new is we have 2 meetings left this year. And so I'm working hard to get those 2 agendas together. We'll not meet on the 27th. I do need to talk to you about January 3rd, if we want to meet that day or not. But we are getting down to the end of the year. And that's all I really have, Commissioners.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioner Willie, any miscellaneous items?
Oh, just briefly, I did have a good tour of the 911 dispatch just looking at not only the work that they do, but the space needs there and the security needs. Just, it was wanting to lay eyes on some of these pieces of the puzzle with the judicial and law enforcement conversation, which I believe we get to come back to next week.
I'm just checking my calendar real quick. I see Jeff here, and Jeff, I apologize, I won't make it Friday. I'm very disappointed. Please tell the planning commissioners I'm sorry. That's always one of my favorite days, I must admit. That's the nerd in me, Sarah. Yeah, I don't think I have any other miscellaneous item.
2 commissioners at the EDC meeting
Oh, yeah,
tomorrow.
I will be there tomorrow. Are you going to that?
I will not.
Okay. So I think maybe just one.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I take it back.
Oops.
Yes, the EDC and Panasonic update is on my calendar for tomorrow at 4.
Okay.
So
I'll
yes,
make
please.
sure,
Glad you checked.
get it added.
Thanks for asking.
Right.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.